We've got this story from Interactive Polls, the latest from Nate Silver, projecting Donald Trump with a 56.7% chance of winning, with swing states swinging to Trump, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, and Nevada, with only Michigan and Wisconsin going to Kamala Harris. Polymarket now has Trump at 51%. Could this be why we are seeing the Harris campaign now come out with more egregious and misleading statements?
Well, did you see at the rally that she had with Biden in Pennsylvania over the weekend, she said something to the effect of, we know this race is going to be very competitive. We can't pay attention to polls right now. Her campaign at one point was bragging about all these headlines that were saying she was winning in these swing states and she was ahead. And now she's telling her supporters like, oh, well, we don't know what the polls are going to say, like just sort of shifting away from them because it's not the headlines that she wants anymore.
I think what's happening here is the voters in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin are going to decide this race. And a lot of those voters are old white guys. And Joe Biden was able to convince those old white guys that he was unthreatening and that he would be a very normal president. That wasn't true, but he was able to convince them. Kamala's not doing that. And I think what Nate Silver's prediction reflects is there's starting to be a little bit of panic setting in because those old white guys are looking at Kamala and they're like, this ain't Scranton Joe. This is not 80-year-old Joe Biden who's just the same age as Trump, but maybe a little bit less active on Twitter. Things will get back to normal. This is Kamala Harris, who doesn't have kids of her own, who is 60 years old herself, kind of weird, not very normal, frankly. And I think the data's I think they're starting to panic. I think that's why they put out the clip about you. I think that's why they got 10 or 15 other clips already saved that they're going to put out to try to build on this threat of Trump as Hitler.
You don't think Tim Walz is helping the white men in the Midwest believe in Kamala Harris?
You know what the problem is with
I don't think that's working well.
I don't think so either. He's so clearly milquetoast. He's such a little little puffy man that doesn't seem to have any spine at all. Like you try and imagine him being in the military at all is just like laughable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's why they tried to play up this coach thing. I mean, maybe you could talk about this with the impact on sports in American psychology, but they had to immediately shift away from the veteran perspective because it was just not working for obvious reasons. And so they're saying Coach Walz, the only person I know in government who uses that nickname is Tommy Tuberville out of Alabama, who actually is pretty principled and, seems like he projects himself pretty masculine. Tim Walz does not. Tim Walz seems like just the annoying suburban, president of the HOA who's policing your lawn and not being nice to anyone in the neighborhood.
Well, his brother doesn't like him.
I saw that,
was
but
crazy.
When he came out and spoke, what you just hit on is so important. He's the governor of Minnesota. Did you see the placards that they were holding said Coach Walz?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They didn't call him Governor Walz.
Well, they'd never refer to Kamala Harris as vice president.
Right.
They only talked about her as
they're
vice
trying to
president
run
when they were
as
dragging
if
her.
she's new.
They're like, she's this outsider. She's a California prosecutor. They don't even talk about her time in the Senate because she didn't get anything done. She was completely ineffectual. She was ultra liberal, and she was, a meaningless entity there.
He was 25 years ago an assistant coach. Mm-hmm. He wasn't even the head coach.
They call him Coach Walz.
Yeah.
He's not even currently coaching his kids' team.
It was a quarter century ago. And they're standing there with placards for Coach Walz. I think it's a clear attempt to try to appeal to what I call the Big Ten voters. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that she's going to connect with them at all. And I think that data's starting to reflect that she is not. And the panic is going to get more intense. And if Trump can just stay the course, I think that she's going to self-destruct.
I wonder if, because people talk about the DNC bump didn't emerge or whatever, but also Donald Trump's been doing a lot of these podcasts.
I think that's so great.
I think that may be boosting him. He's, let me tell you guys a secret. It's not really a secret, but, we work with some advertisers periodically, and we often hear shock at how well ads perform when they sponsor this show. They say we spend twice as much advertising on other platforms or, television, radio, billboard, but IRL, man, he's like, man, you guys as fans, look at what Matt Gaetz says about the show. Not even from an advertising perspective, just he meets people all the time who are big fans.
They run up to him, yeah.
But here's the reality. It's because this is just a show, whereas the other shows are bots and fake numbers puffed up so they can sell ads. We're membership driven. I'm not relying on selling ad spots, so I don't need to puff the numbers up and say we get 10 million views. I don't need to do that. Because then if you do, you go to an advertiser and you say 10 million views, is what we're going to get you, and you're going to give us X amount of dollars, and then they sell 10 widgets or whatever. They sponsor Timcast, and we're like, here's our viewership, and they're like, wow, we sold way more than we normally do for this rate. That's what I see with Kamala Harris. That's what I see with Donald Trump doing these podcasts. Trump starts going on these podcasts. This is where the audience actually is, where the key demo actually is. And these television programs, these cable TV news shows have passive viewers who are either in hotel lobbies or airports, or they're at home and they're not really paying attention, and you do not connect the same. Trump starts doing these podcasts with all these different people. People are starting to hear him. And now they're going, oh.
Yeah, he's going to where the people are. And
right.
I think that's so important. It's also reflective of the campaign that he's really been trying to run, repeatedly since 2016. I can't believe that this is the third, maybe basically fourth, don't pick Trump campaign that the DNC has launched. If they were smart, and really what I'm saying is if Kamala Harris had any charisma or personality, she would go on the equivalent to these kind of podcasts. She would go and call her daddy, that feminist girl boss, whatever podcast. She would go to these places that are going to lob her 100 softball questions, and people are going to say, but she's cool and trendy.
All the little NPR shows.
But she can't do it.
She should come on Timcast IRL.
Yeah, she should come on Timcast IRL.
That would be pretty great.
But she won't, and it's because she can't. I mean, unless she can bring her best buddy Tim Walz with her, right?
She doesn't do anything.
I think it also is reflective of if you spend 45 minutes or an hour with somebody, it's hard to caricature them.
Well, I'll tell you, for a show like this, the reason why it's so hard to get Democrats is because we don't let people just say it. Let me give you an example, a better way to describe this. When Dana Bash was like, you said you carried a weapon of war in war. And he goes, well, my grammar's not so good. My wife says that. But it's not that. They're going to go after my kids. And on this show, I'd be like, yeah, dude, but you said you were in war. I mean, own it. Just say you're sorry or whatever. We can move on. But you can't just gloss over it and not answer the question. You come on a show like this, or any other podcast for that matter, they're not going to let you get away with that.
I think that's right.
That was a great trend, I thought, that Vivek Ramaswamy started in when he was running during the primaries and stuff. He would go on any show that asked him on.
Yeah.
I think JD's doing that.
That was so great. Yeah, JD's doing that. And also,
we got to get JD on the show.
You see Trump. That's awesome. But you see Trump going on so many podcasts. And he's going out to where the voters are.
I saw the Fox News stat. Trump and JD did 34 national shows between the two of them in August.
I think
Walz
Harris,
and Harris did one.
I was going to say, I think Harris has done fewer interviews than Joe Biden has, and he is notoriously withdrawn from the media. Mm-hmm. I mean, are you telling me that the guy who we think has dementia is better able to talk to the press than you are, and you want to be the president?
This JD, this Vance Weird campaign they're doing?
Yeah.
I actually think it works to a certain degree because JD Vance is so normal. And I do mean that. He is not... If he was wearing a cowboy hat and would go on shows and just bombastically yell and bang the table and bang a cowbell whenever he was making a point, you could call him all sorts of things, and then he'd yell over you. Donald Trump talks over people famously, excuse me, and then he jumps in. He doesn't let you get away with it. J.D. Vance is too mild-mannered and normal. So when they make these things about him, he's just like, oh, that's ridiculous. And it's not a strong enough reaction.
I also think they are devious and diabolical, and most people don't know J.D. Vance.
Exactly.
So you can characterize him however you would like. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was looking at favorables today. Tim Walz has 20 points higher favorability right now than J.D. Vance. Tim Walz is weird. I mean, you want to talk about weird. I mean, the guy lied about his DUI. The guy's claiming to be a coach 25 years after he did it.
Assistant coach.
I'm trying to be, yes, but still bragging about it.
But you were saying before he was never actually a coach.
Never actually a head coach.
Yeah.
I mean, for most people who are in sports, the guy who is the assistant coach doesn't brag about winning the state championship.
Right.
I mean, Bill Belichick won 6 Super Bowls. Nobody knows all the assistants and how many Super Bowls they won. You are the head coach. You get credit for the wins or the losses. The assistant coaches don't. And so, but they have been so good about characterizing Tim Walz as the normal football guy because they have so many more media assets. Walz hasn't even done interviews.
But the other thing too is they really play up Walz being the stupid white guy.
Yeah.
Which I don't think really plays that well with voters who are, so many young white men are flocking to Trump. They don't want to be the stupid white guy. They don't eat tuna fish and mayonnaise tacos. They don't do any of this stuff.
Who does that?
Yeah, I've never heard of anybody
literally
doing
no
that.
one does that. Remember that little scripted episode they did?
I know.
I mean, and
What is
also
it like mayonnaise and tuna fish?
Yeah,
what?
Tim also tells
white
you what
man
Kamala
tacos.
Harris thinks
That's
of
called a
white
wrap.
men.
yeah,
You take a tortilla and you put tuna on it. You call it a tuna wrap.
right. It's like a little snack, maybe. I don't know. My kid eats
Little
tuna.
romaine.
But they also
celery
to
in
your
But you
point.
also but Tim Walz several years ago won a recipe contest
Yes.
with a spicy dish. It was chock full of cayenne pepper. So on top of everything else, they are clearly trying to play him up as the stupid white guy, and that's probably also a lie. He eats cayenne pepper.
He's a master chef.
Well,
at home.
also
Well,
it's
I think it had tater tots in it or whatever. But
it was a taco hot dish
Yeah.
with various spices, garlic, onion, peppers, cayenne, whatever.
But rather than being like, I am a proud Midwesterner and we love casseroles, he instead was like, I am your dumb white sidekick, which is essentially Obama Biden 2.0. That he was this cool guy from the city and, he was going to be our first,
except
black
that at least
president.
Biden had a
But
career
then-
going back to the 70s.
Yeah, except in this case, she has no charm, and at least Obama had some charisma, and he is untrustworthy, and people, even Democrats, know that. So
the camo
And
hat.
we're also
the camo
all
hat
really
to me.
tired of the stupid white guy trope. Like
The
we don't
camo
want
hat
that
is
anymore.
perfect example of that.
Yeah, that's for sure.
We're
And
gonna
Ella
put-
Emhoff wearing it.
That's what I'm saying. It's when you go to Brooklyn and somebody in Brooklyn is like, I love Bud Light. I drink Bud Light all the time. They're ironically drinking
they
a Bud Light.
ironically
That was-
drink the
well, now they
PBR
might
as
drink.
well.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Even the
So
camo hat
I'm going to
thing
wear
was-
camo and
hat
hide
thing
out on
was-
the subway.
The camo hat thing is stolen from Chapel Roan, the pop singer. Like,
Yes.
she tweeted, like, is this a joke? Because that's her merch. That's how uncreative and brainless this campaign is. They're relying on pop culture figures to make these two irrelevant, not personable people seem like they are worth your time and energy.
And her wearing the hat actually is not endearing to Southerners, but to hipster Brooklynites.
Correct.
That's
Who
what
they
they
don't
will.
need to endear themselves to
Southerners are used to seeing people in camo, so we don't think, oh my goodness, I like this person because they're wearing camo. Of course not. You can like them or not like
The
them.
trope would be a guy in a flannel shirt with rolled up sleeves and a mullet and like a trucker hat. And you'd be like, where do you think that person lives? And everyone's going to be like, the South. No, that's Brooklyn. In the South, they're probably wearing like jeans and a t-shirt.
I'll come
They call
back
it
to this.
Bushwick. Yeah.
Bushwick.
It only goes one way. No one in the South tries to pretend they're from New York. Right? Like no politician, for instance, if you, I don't know, who's a successful Southern politician right now, like Ted Cruz doesn't go to New York City and try to pretend that he's from New York City because it would look ridiculous.
If anything, is to wear a bolo tie.
Yet people from New York try to pretend that they're from Texas all the time, and it's considered
I gotta
normal.
say, like, as someone who lived in New York for like 20-something years, I hate that.
Yeah.
Like, whenever I would see New Yorkers walking around in cowboy boots, I'd just be like, just put on some proper shoes. You look ridiculous. And now there's this whole trend in New York of like cowboy country stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the Beyonce thing. And
Well, they
it's
tried to
ludicrous.
claim that Beyonce, the New York Times, I remember seeing the headline, and I couldn't believe I meant to take a picture of it. It's like, Beyonce makes cowboys popular. And I'm like, cowboys have been
are
pretty
already-
popular for a long time. Beyonce
it
wearing
was
a
already
cowboy
trendy,
hat.
and that's why she wrote a Western album. Like her company
Right.
looked around and was like, "We got to keep you relevant. Write a Western country album."
We saw this with Outkick because Outkick came out of the SEC and the Big Ten, the middle part of the country, and then New York and LA became aware that we existed, and it got popular there too. But it's kind of like the television show Yellowstone. Yellowstone took off in the middle part of the country, and then everybody suddenly
they
in
call it,
New
like,
York
the
and
hick
LA,
libs? Yeah.
everybody in New York and LA suddenly realized that it was popular. But I think part of that is the insecurity with New York and LA not realizing that they're not the center of everything that's ever occurred,
Right.
and not wanting to acknowledge that anything in the middle part of the country could actually be great. I live
So
in
they're called
Nashville. I don't
flyover
want to live in
states.
New York or LA.
It
They
was-
literally
is
call them
the-
flyover
Yeah.
states.
And it is like that old New Yorker cover. Do you remember that? And it's like the New Yorker's view of the world.
Yes.
It's like New York, Queens, New Jersey.
That perfect example
LA.
of that. Do you guys remember when the power went out in New York?
Which
like 20
time?
years ago?
You mean in 2002?
And the whole media was like, "Oh my goodness, the power's out."
I was there. I remember exactly.
Oh, of course
where
you
I
do,
was when
because
that
you're in New
happened.
York at that time. But the rest of us were sitting around in the country, and it was as if New York had fallen off the planet.
Here's a
There's
funny
that.
one.
There's that. Yes.
1976,
Yeah.
New York View, and it's 10th Avenue, 9th Avenue, Hudson
go,
River,
Hudson
and then
River.
just barren desert, and then Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, that seems exactly
Jersey
right.
and beyond doesn't exist.
But I mean, New Yorkers are proud of this. They're proud of who they are, and they're proud of their city, and like, God bless them. But yeah, the 14th Street substation blew up. There was a little explosion.
Oh, I remember. I mean, it was. I think Detroit also got a little bit. Detroit power went out, but yeah, the world had come to a close. Aliens had landed.
That was a
I think
great
that there
weekend,
was a
I gotta
time
say.
in
Great weekend.
I think there was a time in American media though where New York really did seem like this wonderful place. Like so many movies are set in New York. People will flock there at Christmas for things, but that's like some place Americans like to visit. They don't want to be there. And I think that's reflective of the politicians, right? They all posture as if they have rural small town ties because ultimately that's where most Americans live and want to stay. This idea that New York would be the Mecca for all things is sort of delusional.
Yeah.
Well, it'll come back.
Okay, New Yorker. Spoken like a New Yorker. I had this one family friend. She's a generational, like, grandparents, great grandparents. Everyone was in New York. And she looked at me one time and she was like, well, New York is the center of the universe. And she's
not wrong.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.